Hey guys, today we're going to talk about Southern Africa. So these are the countries here we're going to take a look at. We're going to talk a lot about South Africa today in particular because politically this is the one that is probably the most influential in this area. But we'll also look at these other ones. So there's Lesotho, Swaziland or Eswatini, Namibia, Botswana, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Malawi, and then Mozambique there. All right, let's get it started. So, the people. So, as with most of Africa, the country borders separate politically, not ethnically. Like we've talked about in other sets of notes, the Europeans did not care about tribal affiliations or anything like that when they made their lines. So, ethnic groups span the political boundaries. So, for example, the Bantu people is a very large ethnic group. So, we talked about them even with Central Africa, but they exist all throughout most of Southern Africa as well. So that's them here. And then you have the Swazi people, okay, who migrated to what is now known as Swaziland or Eswatini, as we saw it on that map. But they also have to contend with the Zulu population. So the Zulu tribe, that's these guys down here, they're more known for being a strong warrior tribe. So they've been able to maintain strong political and cultural presence in South Africa, even though their population isn't as large as some of the others. And then the San people of Namibia are the best known hunters and gatherers in the world. So, since colonial rule, tensions in southern Africa between white and black people have dominated certain countries, especially South Africa. So, we're talking South Africa is this country right here. And they actually have laws that did have laws that separate the population into white, black, mixed, and Asian. And so while they did have a black majority, the whites or the Afrikaners actually, they're the ones who ruled. Okay, so they enacted strict codes that separated blacks and even denied them voting rights. So this would be a similar situation to what we had with the Jim Crow laws in this country. They had, it'll be known as apartheid, which we'll talk about more later on in the notes. So, despite population explosions in parts of Africa, one factor may begin to limit it, and it doesn't seem like such a big deal in this country anymore, but AIDS has really impacted Africa, in particular Southern Africa. So about 70% of the population living with AIDS or HIV live in this region. So the disease is expected to significantly reduce the population within the next 10 years, and about 10.7 million children have lost at least one parent to AIDS, which is incredible. So history and government. So people in Madagascar were trading with outsiders as early as 600 AD. They were mostly trading with the Arabs, but the Europeans also are going to end up trading with them as well. And they'll settle in the region for economic reasons, and some even set up trading posts, like we talked about the Portuguese, for example, set up trading posts. Others are going to colonize. So the Portuguese are going to control Angola throughout the 1500s because they were strong in the slave trade. And so they sent workers and slaves to the Americas and other Portuguese colonies throughout the world. And then in Mozambique, Portuguese built the railroads to transport labor for mining and plantation work. But the indigenous population didn't really benefit from a lot of these improvements, and they were usually exploited for their labor. So this is going to lead to conflict and eventually movements for independence. So most of the colonies experienced difficult transitions after independence. So it was not long after World War II that a bunch of these countries started to gain independence. So Angola is going to get it pretty quickly. They had a coup d'etat, which is an overthrow of the government. So they overthrew the Portuguese in 1975. Botswana got it pretty quickly too, and they've actually been able to maintain a pretty stable government and economy. Zambia has vast resources, but few trained people are actually available to run the government, so their resources are often mismanaged. But their economy basically depends on foreign oversight because they don't really understand how to properly manage it, so they basically source that out to foreigners. And so civil wars in neighboring countries have forced refugees into Zambia because they are pretty they do have like a pretty decent government, a pretty stable-ish government. Okay, but at least they were smart enough to say like, hey, we can't handle this, so they went out and got help. Okay, so South Africa, they're going to become independent actually in the early 1900s. So the white minority population ran the government, like I was talking about before, and they imposed apartheid. So this is really similar to the segregation laws we had, or the Jim Crow laws we had in the United States. So this was a separation of the races. So non-whites were denied political rights and equality with whites in education, in jobs, and in housing. And so internal unrest and then international pressures forced them to end apartheid in the early 1990s. So where we ended segregation in the 1960s, they didn't see it till about 30 years later. And so Nelson Mandela, that's this guy right here, he was the most popular anti-apartheid leader, and he spent 27 years in prison as a political prisoner. But in 1994, he's going to be elected the first black president of South Africa. So this was the first time that they actually had universal suffrage. And so it was a pretty big deal that Nelson Mandela was the first black president in South Africa. It's amazing that it took till 1994 for that to happen. But within a short time, they became committed to democracy. And South Africa is actually a pretty thriving country. Of the countries in Africa, it is one of the most similar to Western culture, so like how we live in the United States or the Europeans live. But at the same time, they still struggle with poverty, especially in the more rural areas. And because of the legacy of apartheid, a lot of the blacks still live in poverty. Okay, so culture. So as far as language goes, some languages are non-African. So English and French and Afrikaans. Afrikaans is it's a language that's derived from Dutch, but also has like a lot of English influences, French influences. So it contains words from English, French, German, and even African languages. It's kind of a blending of language. As far as religion goes, it's pretty much Christianity. But there are some traditional religions that are practiced. We can see on this graph here, there's Christianity, and then very small Hindu, very small Muslim, and other would be more indigenous religions. And then as far as education, higher education has actually expanded in Southern Africa. In particular, South Africa has pretty good schools. Mozambique, there's new schools and teaching training to match the pace of the population increases. So they're trying to train more and more teachers. And just like in most areas, in most countries, the rural areas actually have lower literacy rates than those in the cities. But that's true in most of the world. AIDS, so I told you we were talking a little bit more about this epidemic. It has reached epidemic proportions in Southern Africa. Like I said, 70% of the people who have AIDS live in this region. And so a child born in Zimbabwe is more likely to die from AIDS than anything else. Drug treatments cost too much, and there's a lack of knowledge about how it's spread. So there's a lack of education, and even like contraceptives and that prevent AIDS are not widely available. So the disease just continues to spread, and it spreads very easily even to children when they're being born. As far as leisure time, in the rural areas, people spend their leisure time like playing games or spending time with family. But they also embrace like the local culture, so that would include like music and dancing. And this is where we see more in the rural areas, more of like the traditional religions being practiced, and so you'll see a lot more activities like music and dance related to those religions. And then the urban area, they have a wide variety of culture. Most of them listen to Western style music and movies. They wear Western style clothing. They use cell phones. They watch TV. Just kind of similar to us, especially in South Africa. But the cities in Southern Africa are actually pretty westernized in comparison to other parts of Africa. All right, and that's all I got for you guys today. Don't forget to finish your processor, and I hope you guys enjoy your day.